Welcome, everybody, to the Bob Unger Show. And today we have a real treat for you. Seriously, a very impressive guy with an impressive curriculum vitae. And his name is Dr. Ladapo. And he has written a book called Transcending Fear. And of course, anybody who has a sentient mind would have noticed that we have never seen the kind of fear that was promulgated in the United States. And Dr. Ladapo, just give us a little bit. I know you're a Harvard Medical School guy. I know you went to Wake Forest as an undergrad. I know your family is from Nigeria. Are you also from Nigeria?
Yeah, and thanks for having me on.
Sure.
Yes, I was born in Nigeria and we moved to this country when I was around 5 years old.
Interesting. Very interesting. And anything pertinent about your CV that you think people should know?
There's one thing I do like to highlight, which is that I have a PhD in a research science field. Specifically, it's health policy with a focus in economic statistics and decision analysis. And I highlight that because there, there's just so many people who are very primed to comment on scientific studies, particularly in relation to the pandemic. And I just want people to know that not everyone has the same training. Not everyone's able to evaluate the studies with the same depth or the same quality. And that's very important because we hear a lot of differing perspectives. And it's not everyone has the training to do this.
Ironically, my wife is a PhD in genetic engineering. I'm always the dumbest person in every relationship. And true, he said. And she was fired by Estee Lauder as a chemist because she refused to say that topical creams get into your cells and make you younger, because the research showed that that's simply not true. But as we have come to learn, when it comes to making money, you can make any bogus claim you want. And on that note, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Alan Katz, who amongst his various demerits is a graduate of Yale, but we'll try not to hold it against him. And Dr. Katz is a very, very smart guy. And you guys will have a great conversation. So I'll let Dr. Katz take over.
Thank you so much, Bob, for having me, and Dr. Ladapo for being here. Just want to start off by getting right into the meat of the controversy that you seem to be embroiled in. Probably did not think by publishing a study and making a recommendation about the safety of vaccines and where the risk-reward ratio should lead us. So could you just quickly give us like a little summary of the study that you did that showed the increased incidence of heart problems in especially in younger men?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and I'm really glad we did it because it I think has opened up more space for people who have concerns to be vocal, which is very important, to create that space for people to be able to stick their necks out a bit further. So, as everyone who is honest has noticed, there's been essentially this coordinated effort to suppress information about the COVID-19 vaccines that is negative and to really elevate anything about the vaccines that's positive. And in that kind of environment, you're not ever going to be the best service to people, because people who want to make an informed decision, or worse, who have been experienced some adverse effect and they don't know whether it's related to the vaccine or not that they took yesterday or last week, it's really demoralizing to both of those camps of people to not have more honesty about safety. So I asked the Florida Department of Health biostatisticians that work in the department to take a look at, to examine mortality after the COVID-19 vaccines, both the mRNA and the non-mRNA. And they used a method called a self-controlled case series. And this is a method, despite what people were saying in the media, it's literally been used in hundreds of published papers. It's a very standard method, among other methods that people use to assess safety and efficacy of medications and vaccines and that kind of thing. And the advantage of this method is that it is more resistant to confounding due to individual characteristics. And what I mean by that is that one of the challenges with evaluating vaccine safety or efficacy is that there is tremendous bias, and this bias can confound your estimates. And what does that mean? It just means that people who choose to get a vaccine are different from people who choose not to, for reasons that go beyond things that we can easily measure, like their age and their sex and their heart, their health problems. There are differences that go beyond that and can make it difficult to reach an unbiased estimate. So this analysis used this method, the self-controlled case series method. And what it found, the really major thing that it found, was that there was an 84% increased risk of cardiac death in the first 28 days after mRNA COVID-19 vaccination compared to the period, the next 5 months or so. And so that's what it found. And that was specifically in young men. So that signal wasn't present in any other age groups, any other sexes. So the analysis was, I think it was obviously important to do. It was something that should have been done already, considering all we already knew about myocarditis. And then what we're learning more about subclinical myocarditis. That's another issue. So these are cases of myocarditis where the person might not be going to the hospital with chest pain or shortness of breath, but nonetheless, there's evidence of cardiac injury if you take their blood and you look for cardiac enzymes. So this is something that should have been done already. We did it because we're in a dishonest atmosphere where people don't want to be honest about safety. And the analysis isn't perfect. There are sources of bias that provide an upward bias for the estimate of risk, but also sources that potentially bias the risk downward. For example, is the risk period really 28 days or is it longer? So, but people who, so it's an imperfect study. So how do you interpret it? How do you make a judgment? And I wrote an article that was in the Wall Street Journal, I think about a week and a half ago or so, that basically argued that this wasn't the only signal. I cited another paper in JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association. I cited a study that was published in Scientific Reports, which is a Nature family journal that found an association between mRNA COVID-19 vaccination in Israel and acute cardiac issues in young people. I cited an FDA study that's they've been very quiet about, but this study reported a 15% increase in risk of heart attacks in Medicare enrollees after the mRNA COVID-19 vaccines. And I cited one or two other studies. And basically, while our study is imperfect, considering that this age group was the only group that had the signal, and also happens to be the group that's already known to have cardiac issues, and the other evidence, and the fact that everyone's had COVID by now, just about almost every person in this country has already contracted COVID, that it just doesn't make sense to be recommending these vaccines to young men. It just doesn't make sense. So that was the recommendation, and I'm very confident it's the right recommendation.
Now, to be clear, you're recommending that people of that age group don't get it. You're not banning them from getting it in the state of Florida, right?
No, I think it's in their
Your
best
recommendation.
interest
Yeah,
right
right.
now
Right.
not to get it.
Well,
And I honestly, Denmark doesn't recommend these for people under 50
There are a
now.
lot of countries now that are not.
Countries, right?
Yeah.
To me, it's pretty obvious. I mean, that just doesn't. It's just a lot of risk, and it's
Right.
really unclear what the benefit is at this point.
Right. What about all these studies from Europe now, where you're seeing with the Euromoma, where they keep data on mortality, and you're seeing after the vaccine this dramatic increase in mortality among young people. Not
I'm not as familiar.
Yeah, so that's
I'm not as familiar with those data. After the show, please feel free to.
okay.
I've seen some stuff, but more related to, for example, now something that's been published, which is negative vaccine efficacy. So over time, particularly with just the primary series, these mRNA COVID-19 vaccines, over time, good studies clearly show that whatever protection there was from infection just actually goes negative. There's a paper in the New England Journal of Medicine recently that showed something similar.
Right.
But I'd certainly be happy to look at those data.
Yeah. Also, look at the life insurance companies in this country have reported huge increases in payouts.
I've seen that. I've read a trade group report.
Right. What's that about? I mean, it sounds like all these things together add up to an important signal that I think is a real, should be very cautionary. But yet what bothers me, as you said, people are ignoring it, and it's full steam ahead. Get more boosters,
Right.
questioning. And a person like you who just questioned this, showed the study. I've seen relentless attacks on you in the media.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're aware of. But one thing then that also I'm very perturbed about is what you're saying is, well, we don't have good studies because these are all retrospective types of studies, right? Observational studies. Why weren't better studies done in a controlled, randomized fashion by Pfizer, by Moderna, by the FDA? Because look at what Pfizer did. They gave people vaccine and they said, oh, look, 95% effective in reducing, in stopping COVID after 3 months. And then they said, okay, end of study.
Right.
Say if you waited 6 months, 8 months, you'd find that goes to negative. So they approve this without really properly studying this. And I say that's the real problem. How do you feel about that?
Oh, that's true. That's true. That was just the greatest gift that Pfizer and Moderna could ever have received, to get to cut their trials short. I mean, that was just an amazing gift to them at the expense of the world.
Right. Now I'm a radiation oncologist. So we rely on, I've seen so many times various studies, retrospective, that suggest things that turn out not to be true when you do really good, controlled, randomized trials. So that really is the gold standard. And we just don't have that. But even further, the one thing that maybe you could comment on, even in the trial that they did, Moderna and Pfizer, they showed no benefit in terms of mortality from the vaccine. No benefit.
Right.
And the question is, why do people go around saying, oh, millions of lives were saved? Where's that coming?
Well, that's coming from most observational data that finds an association between the COVID-19 vaccines and reductions in mortality. And where that tends to be concentrated is older people. Those studies do have problems because they're retrospective. They're not clinical randomized clinical trials. I think overall it's the risk of COVID's severe illness it's increased in folks who are older. And I think the observation that both the vaccines and prior infection reduce the risk of COVID death it's pretty strong. But again, it's not the only thing. We should be considering overall mortality, and we should really differentiate between the risk that older people face versus the risk that younger people or the risk that children face. And that distinction has been something that has been blurred by the CDC and federal leadership. But fortunately, some countries in Europe aren't blurring it like we are.
Yeah, yeah. Don't you feel like they're using like a one size fits all recommendation? Everyone should get the vaccine,
Oh yeah, that's exactly what they recommend.
and yet the risk of getting very sick or dying is so different if you're
Oh.
10 years old versus if you're 85 years old. You know,
Orders and orders of magnitude.
yeah, we were seeing all the deaths, almost all the deaths that were occurring during the worst part of COVID in my hospital were 85, 90-year-old people.
Mm.
And you know, so those are the people that you should have concentrated on with the studies, I think, especially because that's where you really could possibly see the benefit. How are you going to see a benefit among kids when their risk is so tiny? How are you ever going to see any kind of a
Well, in fact, one hasn't been demonstrated in the clinical
Right.
trials. You know, they failed to do that in the clinical trials. And you're exactly right, particularly for healthy children. It's just there's zero high quality evidence that they benefit at all. And there is evidence about harms. I recently mentioned this, like I put this thing out on Twitter about this Moderna trial that was published maybe a week and a half, two weeks ago in the New England Journal of Medicine. And the rate in the first 28 days, none of the kids in the placebo group had a serious adverse event. And these are things like, you know, hospitalization, serious medical condition requiring intervention, things like that. But the rate in the vaccine group was 1 in 200 in the toddler age group. So
which is way too high.
Pardon?
Which is way too high.
It's incredibly high.
Yeah.
It's incredibly high. So it's just it's really not clear what the hell is going on with the CDC and the FDA, but I'm grateful at least that parents aren't going for it anymore.
That's for sure. It looks like maybe people in the United States have awakened a bit and are just bringing their kids for this. I want to switch gears for a second. Something else that's I've been a physician. I graduated from NYU Med, and I know that you had been there for some period of time.
Yeah.
NYU. And
I was there.
1977. And in those days, I never saw the kind of censorship and the kind of attacks on people who just ask questions about the status quo. As we know, medicine progresses because people question the status quo. And we find out, like a lot of things that I learned in medical school as fact, just weren't so.
Right.
And so now we have a situation where people like you or people like Peter McCullough, Harvey Risch, people like that are being attacked who are questioning the status quo. And this seems to be so dangerous for the future of medicine. I just would like you to comment on that.
Oh, you're absolutely right. Dr. McCullough, Dr. Harvey Risch, they're both friends of mine. And now the American Board of Internal Medicine is basically making a move to take away Dr. McCullough's
certification.
Yeah. Not because he didn't pass his exams, he did. Not because he doesn't take care of patients and take good care of patients, he does, but because they disagree with his assessment of COVID-19 policies, specifically in relation to the vaccines. It's so absurd. Dr. McCullough, boy, he has really been just taking a lot of flack, and he's been there before almost everyone else. He's been very outspoken, and I really admire him. And I certainly stand by him. It is unbelievable that they have the gall to persecute someone because that individual has a different assessment. And I've read the letter from them. It's total nonsense.
Yeah.
There's statements, fine, you have a different opinion, but that he gets it's crazy considering all the things that have flip-flopped during this pandemic from the CDC to all of a sudden say that there's only one truth. And by the way, if you don't subscribe to that, we're going to take away your board certification. We'll see how this goes, but I think it's going to end very badly for them, as it should.
Well, yeah, I think we've gone back about 500 years to the Catholic Church excommunicating people like Galileo and Copernicus for going against the the grain, so to speak, going against their dogma, and it's very disturbing to me. And I noticed that also the United States government was trying to besmirch the reputation of those that signed the Great Barrington Declaration. I don't know if you were a signatory on that. Did you sign on to that one?
Yeah, I sure did. Dr. Jay Bhattacharya is
Right.
a good friend of mine.
Right.
And yeah, it's a very
Did you
sensible.
see this? The emails though, they were saying we have to destroy their reputations. Emails
I saw them, Dr.
and Saint Anthony Fauci.
Yeah.
Yeah, very, I mean, really disturbing. I mean, you couldn't ask, I think, for more reasonable, intelligent people, you know, as Jay Bhattacharya, Harvey Rich, people like Martin Kulldorff. And I noticed Martin Kulldorff is no longer at Harvard. I wonder if this has something to do with it.
Yeah, he's a brilliant guy. He's
Yeah.
a brilliant guy, no longer at Harvard.
Very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's something.
Yeah.
Doctor, what year did Governor DeSantis appoint you as the Surgeon General of Florida?
Oh, he appointed me about, it was last year, and technically it was about 13 months ago.
Wow. And I understand that he did that because he read one of your articles.
The truth is I've never actually asked him exactly why, but I mean, ultimately, actually, why he did it is because he must have felt that I would do a good job. And I think he agreed with my ideas, our assessment of pandemic policy. It was very similar and remains very similar. So I think probably the combination of all those things, obviously the articles that I wrote in the Wall Street Journal were important in the sense that it was important to have that voice that was saying something different and was in a prominent newspaper, just to go against all the nonsense that people were receiving, but felt they couldn't say anything against.
Are you familiar with the Emory Law School? It's a very extensive research report on medical schools, and I was shocked pleasantly because I don't have a high regard for law schools. They wrote a fabulous research paper on the incestuous connection between medical schools and the drug companies. Now, I would recommend that if you get a chance, take a glance. You can Google it, Emory Law School, regarding the influence on the medical schools by the drug companies. And when you read that, and these people are not exactly right-wing zealots, as they like to call anybody who asks any question at all.
Yeah.
These are liberal, so-called, quote unquote, Democrats, and they were talking about the connection between the drug companies and the medical schools.
Wow, I definitely want to see it. Please do me a favor and send it to the publisher who's coordinated this interview. I definitely want to see it. If you could send the link.
Are you talking about Publius? Or
the report you're describing now?
Yeah, Publius is I think your agent or something. I don't know.
Oh, right. Yes. They work with Skyhorse Publishing, but
we both just had lunch with Tony Lyons.
Oh, did you? Oh,
yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
You guys must be in New York.
Yeah, we're in New York.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah,
what part of
We also had lunch with the CEO of Newsmax, Chris Ruddy.
Oh, very cool.
And we were talking about you. Your ears would have been burning.
Oh, maybe, yeah.
Actually, very, very positive, and I can see why, because people who know me, I'm kind of like Stu Peters, and I don't exactly patronize people and genuflect before them. So if I give you a compliment, you can bet it's sincere.
Oh, that's it. Thank you.
The criticism is sincere.
That's a kind. What part of town are you guys in?
We're in Great Neck, which is just outside of New York City, on Long Island.
Yeah,
cool.
The home of the Great Gatsby.
Very cool. We lived in Manhattan for 5 years.
Ah,
So,
Oh, when were you at NYU then?
yeah,
Right.
yeah, we enjoyed it.
Right.
also Groucho Marx lives here.
Okay,
Are you too
You know,
young for
yeah.
Groucho Marx?
You
I
know,
don't know that. I'm sorry.
well,
Yeah.
yeah.
He's an old-time
Well, I
comedian.
think I'm thinking you were born in the late 70s, I bet.
Yeah, that's right.
He
That's right.
died in 77, so we can forgive you for not. But he did a lot of great movies. You would recognize him if you saw images of him, because people have used it with a cigar and a big black mustache and black eyebrows. You'd recognize. But I
Cool.
just wanted to get back to ask you something also about Ron DeSantis. Here's a guy also who has been relentlessly attacked in the media over many things besides COVID.
Oh my gosh.
When he opened up the beaches and said people can go outside and live, they said he was a murderer. Literally, I heard them say he was murdering people. And we know the safest place to be is outside, right? With COVID.
In the sun.
And in the sun, get some vitamin D, get the sun, get some fresh air. The people who did worse were the lockdown people. We found that here in New York City. The people who were locked down got COVID at a higher rate than people who went about and did their business, which was also your point in the Great Barrington Declaration, right? That people
Absolutely. No, it's
about
terrible. I mean,
do
everything
their
about
business.
yeah. We'll just say everything about lockdowns is terrible. It's the social isolation is a killer. We've known that way before the pandemic. Many studies. Social isolation, kind of quarantining, physical isolation from other people is a risk factor for depression, for lots of stuff, bad
Alcohol.
stuff. It's a killer. It's a killer. And then the vitamin D, the studies show different things. My sense is that it's very harmless at 1 or 2,000 units a day. And there's some evidence it may be beneficial. There's evidence, some trials have been unfavorable, but all in all, I think I would recommend it for people because the science is still, our understanding is still evolving there. But yeah, the physical activity, not getting that, the isolation, not getting that, the sunshine, not getting that. It's ironic that it's literally a formula for a premature death, essentially. Whereas being outside, being physically active, fresh air, sunshine, like all those things are good for you, and those were the things that were frowned upon and prohibited in most parts of the country. It's kind of insane.
Right. Well, it was an interesting experiment because we are a country, to put my lawyer hat on for a second, federalist country. That is a country of states. And states have a lot of power according to the Constitution. The federal government is very limited. So we got to see states doing different things, having different policies, and get to compare the outcomes. Like, for instance, look at what California did to their economy and to their schools. That's the other thing. To me, one of the worst things was that they denied kids the right to go to school.
Yeah.
And then we're now seeing their test scores have dramatically dropped. And then we have like the Michigan governor in her debate saying, well, we didn't really close the school. She closed it for well over a year. She thinks everyone forgets, oh yeah, my kid was home for over a year, but no, it wasn't true.
These people, we didn't really deny natural immunity. Oh no, it had nothing to do with the school closures.
Remember that? Right. Also, if you get the vaccine, you can't get COVID.
Yeah, these people
over and over they said that, right? And yet they're the ones who now want to be the arbiter of truth, of authority, when they've made so many false statements. It's really a little Orwellian, I have to say. I think George Orwell's looking at us now going, well, guys, I think I told you.
You are absolutely correct. That is absolutely correct.
Right.
And I agree. I think he's probably crying and now laughing at what's happening.
Well, he's probably laughing because his book sales have gone up a lot.
Yeah.
Because I've recommended this book. A lot of people didn't know it. I said, go get this book, buy this book, read it, and then report back to me and tell me if you see something there that sounds a little familiar. Familiar. And yeah, they do.
Yeah.
So in heaven, he's earning his I think he still gets, royalties in heaven. I don't know.
Doctor,
Maybe the,
we're running out of time.
celestial type or something. Type of
Doctor, we're
royalty.
running out of time, so we got to wind this down. It was really, it was an honor. You know, it was a privilege to talk to you, and I mean that.
Great
Because
privilege.
someone with your background, number one, as I said earlier, it really is an inspiration that young people should see what you've done and what you've accomplished. Not that you're an old man at the end of your life, but what you've accomplished is very impressive. And this is what people should be promoting in this society, not always telling people that they don't have a chance and people are trying to hold them down and people are conspiring to destroy people, turning everybody into a victim. Instead of pointing to you and saying, this is what you can be. You don't have to be a doctor, but the point is that it's analogous to anything you want to do in life. And it's really a credit to you. And I'm sure, without knowing you, that you had a family that was great and told you that you could do things. And you know, that's the key. And you had probably either a mother or father or both who disciplined you and told you you couldn't do whatever you want, because if you tell a kid he can do whatever he wants, he'll watch video games all day and eat candy. So once again, a great credit to you. And if we ever get down to Florida, can we buy you lunch?
I love that. Yeah, we could definitely come down the Tampa area. Please let me know.
There's a place in Pascagoula Beach, the Hurricane. I used to go there for grouper sandwiches. We'll take you there.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
No,
Anything final you want to say?
Well, I just want to say that, you know, it makes my heart feel good to know that there are doctors out there like you who have the courage, and it takes courage in today's world to speak, to do these important studies, and to try to, you know, make people aware of what's going on. And there's so few. Most doctors are just either they've bought, you know, into the whole thing, they've drank the Kool-Aid, so to speak, or they're scared to say something. I know a lot of doctors who are just scared.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Dr. Katz was banned by his hospital, by the way.
No, good for you.
I'm a victim of, no, it wasn't though I had the hospital, it was by New York State. They have a vaccine mandate for healthcare workers in the hospitals. So I could see patients, but I have to see them somewhere else outside the hospital. And they still hold to this day.
Well, I admire you for sticking with what you believe in.
Yes, well, you know, and there was a price to pay. But I know hopefully the new governor of New York has already said he's going to lift that mandate.
Oh man, if he wins, I will, boy.
Well, it'll be
something.
And it'll be an earthquake because everybody on CNN will be crying. They're going to show up in black and they'll be crying.
Oh, man, that would be oh gosh, that would be amazing. That would be
right. So we'll see. But no, but your courage also is very, you know, very inspiring to me, because I've read the things. I've seen you on Fox News and I saw you, and just like now, you seem like a very intelligent, reasonable person. And they talk about you like you're some kind of a nut.
Yeah, stealing babies, you know, doing all sorts of, all sorts of terrible stuff.
Yeah. I don't know where this country's heading, to be honest.
Yeah.
Right.
It's gonna get better. I'm sure it's gonna get better. And every day it's getting better. You and I talk.
I hope you're right.
Well, Doctor, thank you so much for your precious time, and may God bless you and your entire family. And we, you know, they sing the song, God Bless America, but we need to start blessing God instead. And God will bless America. And God bless you again. And thank you so much.